Okay, good morning. I want to see Lynn jump. We have a guest speaker this morning. Lynn Leader is going to lead us off with a word, a good word.
Now it's time to start Dinners for Six again. Yay! And some people may not know what it is, but we get groups of 6 people, sometimes 7. Depends on how the numbers crash out. And you meet once a month for dinner or lunch or even breakfast and arrange it between everybody. And it's a fun time and a good way to get to know everybody in the class, better than you do sitting at the table. So this year this session, I think this is the 7th mix. I'll send out an email. If Judy sends me the email list, I'll send it out to everybody. And then you can respond to me, so you don't respond to Judy and have her get back to me. Or Nancy, either way, right? And then just respond to me if you are, and we'll put the list together. And if you've been doing Dinners for 6 and you didn't respond, I'll probably either call you or send you an email just to double check. I know that life can get busy, but emails can get missed too. So we'll proceed that way, and then we'll do the mix and hand them out in a couple weeks. Thanks.
Ready for in here? Yeah. No, we can maybe turn the air down.
Turn the air up.
Okay, one more thing before I turn over to Jim is Jeff. Could you raise your hand, Jeff? Jeff is a practical person who wants to help people who need help in their home. And he can do electric, I know, plumbing, any kind of practical work. He would like to help people who are widows and orphaned, though. But he would like to be contacted. If you need something like that, Jeff is a great resource for that. He's helped us as well, and I'm not a widow. So, great help. I appreciate that. Yeah. Contact you.
I know he's on the roster, but
Yeah.
What's his last name? What's his last name?
Scheffler. 1-800-Scheffler. Okay. Well, we're hoping Eric Ebbinghaus was bouncing the door, but I don't see Eric yet. Maybe he'll come in. If he comes in, we'll just stop what we're doing. We normally, as you know, do pretty serious Bible study, verse by verse, sometimes chapter by chapter. But the eminent Wes Wagner asked me if I would take 2 weeks and just do the history of Israel, to help people understand the significance of Israel. So last week we did the before Christ, the BC, and now we're doing the AD, which I don't think after death, but it's actually from the Latin Anno Domini, the year of our Lord. And if you ever seen BCE, BC was before Christ. BCE is before the Common Era, because they were trying to get Christ off. Yeah, Judy doesn't like it. Yeah, you have this woolly handout that's full of text. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but I thought that way you can follow through on your own. But I want to just tell some stories if I can. Story time with Jim. And by having the notes, it'll be less likely that I'll chase rabbits, okay, which I've been known to do. Because history is just full of rabbits, right? But we start with the Jews in Jerusalem. King Herod, Herod the Great. There were 3 Herods. The first Herod, Herod the Great. You can see his years on there. He's the guy that's the Herod who wants to kill all the babies that were born in Bethlehem. Now, Bethlehem's not a big town, and there weren't that many boys under 2 years old, probably under 100, but it was genocide. And he ordered the death of all those kids that were under the age of 2. He's the one that rebuilt the temple. This was the 3rd temple. When you think about the temple in Jerusalem, Solomon built the temple, correct?
Yes.
David wanted to build it, and God said, no, there's too much blood on your hands, too many battles. I'm going to let your son build it. Then it got torn down in the Babylonian captivity. Zerubbabel kind of built on the rubble, built it back up, right? But it was a smaller temple. And then when it came Herod's time, it had fallen down again. Herod rebuilds it again. But interestingly, each version of the temple was slightly smaller in scale, they say. So the original temple was the largest one. Then you're going to see in a minute here, in 71 AD, the Roman general Titus comes in to Jerusalem in an army, and he's angry. He burns the city and tears down the temple. And so that's why there's no temple in Jerusalem at all today. when you see pictures of Jerusalem, you see pictures of a beautiful building with a big golden dome on it. That's not the Jewish temple. It didn't have a golden dome. That is a Muslim thing called Dome of the Rock. Yes, no, you're my hands. Anyway, so on the right side of the handout, we realize that the Greek Empire has already faded out after the death of Alexander the Great, and now Rome is in charge. Yes, sir.
So it's also believed that Herod reigned was an Edomite. He was not Jewish.
He was half Jewish. Yeah, he was Edomite, yeah. So one of his parents was Jew and one of them wasn't. So he was able to wangle the political position. But he really wanted, hey, here we go, right here. A man who needs no introduction. His name. I told him when you came in, we would just stop what we're doing.
Oh, I gotta go around here. Let's go.
I don't know how y'all put up with it. I'll tell you what, too. There are so many of you in here. I can tell a lot of you need to start breathing through your nose. It is warm. Okay.
See?
So, hey, I asked permission a couple weeks ago if I could just swing up, say a big thank you, give you a little bit of update from youth camp. I spoke in here in May, maybe it was. Just talking about a little bit of the need, big needs. Youth camp is expensive. The camp that we go to it's called NTS camp. It stands for Never the Same. In Iowa. It's held at Dordt University. So Dordt is not the host for the camp. It's just kind of like the location that hosts the organization. So NTS camp comes in, they pop up, set up their operation, and run things. And it was phenomenal. It was just such a great week. We were able to raise most of our need through fireworks tents for transportation, which was my big ask when I was here in May. If you remember, we figured our 2 charter buses were going to cost about $20,000. And I think from tents, I think our take home was about $22,000. So when I say tents, I mean TNT fireworks tents that we run leading up to and through the 4th of July. So they did well. They did at least as well as we needed them to. And then many of your gifts given specifically to scholarship students as well. I think we had 11 students on full scholarship, and then we had about another 24 that were on partial scholarships. And through many of you and others in the church that donated, we raised another $10,500 to be able to provide scholarships to students. And through that, we took 81 kids to camp. That's so cool. It's the most I've ever taken to youth camp, more than twice as many actually as I've ever taken before. 9 adults came along, and then we were able to bless a church from Denver in our district. It's a Korean church, and they were called Juwon Church. And they had 10 right along with us as well. So we had 100 seats filled out of 104 available seats. So we only had 4 vacant seats on the buses, which was a huge answer to prayer. We saw 9 kids say yes to Jesus for the very first time at camp. And then we saw over 50 stand up in some way say, I need to recommit my life to the Lord, either whether that's intentionally following Him or being more engaged in church, or even starting a prayer group at my school for other kids to connect and have an opportunity to walk together by Jesus or introduce someone to Jesus. And then I think we had about a dozen who, and this is really big, say, I'm willing to answer a call to vocational ministry in the church. So vocational ministry could be any 100 things that would qualify as full-time ministry. So kids even as young as 6th and 7th grade, knowing what that means and being obedient to it, it was a phenomenal week. We were pretty low on drama, so it's hard to put 81, 18 and unders in 2 buses and then in dorms for 5 days straight and avoid it altogether. But what we had was minimal. And I'm a dad and I'm so old, like I don't have time to put up with it. And so we nipped it pretty quick and made sure they knew they were loved in the process and were able to move on. So I just wanted to come say to you guys, thank you so much for your support. Thank you for, whether it was dollars, prayer, sharing the word with others. I know many of you even knocked on doors and as it were, so to speak, and let others know about our need. And because of that, it was a great success, and I'm so thankful for you guys. So.
Tell us how the youth works during the week here these days, because it's always different.
Yeah, so we have a specific time on Sunday morning during the 10:30 service. So the same time we have silver and gold, we actually have middle school teaching down the hall over here. And that's anywhere between 35 and 40 middle schoolers every Sunday morning. And Mickey, my primary resident, youth resident, runs middle school teaching. She plans and organizes it. She's the main teacher for that. And yeah, she's rolling around on her knee scooter that Mary Hagan got for her so generously. She broke her foot in Guatemala. And so if you've seen her scoot around, that's what happened. And she got back and got some pretty bad news. She's 8 more weeks of non-weight bearing, and then another 2 months after that, still in a boot. So she's looking at, like, she broke her foot on the third metatarsal in 2 places, and has a sprain in the boot. So she's been a little bummed. You could be praying for Mickey in the process. So that's our Sunday mornings, and then Wednesday evenings is our large program for everybody. So that's going to be 6th through 12th grade. Our doors open at 6:30 here every Wednesday. We pretty much try to meet without fail on the regular. And we see this summer, we've seen right about as many kids as we've had at camp. So about 80 students on our Wednesdays through the summer. By comparison, last summer it was about 35. So we expect after Labor Day, when things ramp up at the church as a whole as well, to kind of see things get out of control. So we had, in fall of 23, I think we had 2 Wednesday nights that were over 100. In spring of this year, our first 20 Wednesdays of the year, I think we had 5 over 100. And our average attendance went from 48 every Wednesday the year before to 84 every Wednesday this spring. So we're anticipating a big fall. I am nervous, as you can imagine. We are heavily outnumbered now. So, not outgunned, just outnumbered. Okay? So we're looking forward to this fall.
Thank you, Eric.
A.W. Tozer said discipleship is a long obedience in the same direction. That guy right there, long obedience in the same direction. And a church with a large youth group is a healthy church. They're almost as big as us. There's a lot more wisdom in here, though, I'll tell you. There's a lot more hormones down there. Meanwhile, back at the rank. So Herod, we got the Herod guy in charge. Rome is now the empire of the Middle East. And you remember Caesar Augustus was originally named Octavian. That's the nephew of Julius. He declared himself, I am Caesar. In German, it comes out Kaiser. In English, it comes out king, right? And Caesar, Augustus means the first. The month of August is named for that. And he's the first of 12 guys. But what's fun, listen to Luke 1:1 over here. And what's fun, Rick's got this, is I love the book of Luke because he ties things to secular history. Luke 1:1. First couple.
For as much as many have taken in hand to set forth an order of declaration of those.
And we're going to bring you the microphone. Take it down, Rick. It's the first 5 verses. It's the whole, because you're going to hear Luke tie these things to the name of historical people.
For as much as many have taken in hand to set forth and order a declaration of those things which are most assuredly believed among us, even as they deliver them unto us from the beginning, were eyewitnesses and ministers of the word. It seemed good to me also, having had perfect understanding of all the things from the very first to write unto thee in order most excellent Theophilus, that thou mightest know the certainty of those things wherein thou hast been instructed. There were in the days of Herod, the king of Judea, a certain priest named Zacharias, as of course Abiah and his wife was the daughters of Aaron, and her name was Elizabeth.
So we know Herod's years, so now we've kind of nailed it down to a time frame. Now here Luke 2:1 and 2. I think Byron can just do it without the mic. Byron? Oh, Luke 1 and 2. Luke 2:1 and 2. Brian.
And it came to pass in those days that a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be registered. This census first took place while Quirinius was governing Syria.
Yeah, so Caesar Augustus is ruling. We got his years. We got Quirinius, governor of Syria. He's governor of Syria twice, but one of them is 7 BC to 80. So I love Luke. I just love Luke for that. Now, Matthew and John are both eyewitnesses. They wrote the gospel from what they had seen and heard, right? Luke says, when Rick read that, as many as others have done the gospel, Matthew and not John yet, but there were other gospels too. He said, I talked to all the people that were involved. He interviewed everybody. And Luke's his career, his vocation was what? And what did physicians do? They ask questions. They diagnose. So he interviewed lots of people. In fact, we believe that one of the people he interviewed was Mary, and a significant amount of Luke came from Mary. There are 6 narratives about the birth of Jesus: the conception of baby Jesus, the conception of John the Baptist to Elizabeth in old age, the Song of Elizabeth, Song of Mary, the whole narrative of the labor and delivery in Bethlehem, and no room at the inn. You know, where did Luke get that? Who would have known that? Mary. Now, Matthew didn't talk about that, right? Matthew is a tax collector. And Mark is using Peter as his source. She might not tell those things to a fisherman, but she would tell those things to a physician about her. I think it's Luke, we're just rich because of Luke. And so Luke is the only one that ties things to the secular history and says, this guy was Caesar, this guy was the governor here. I love that about Luke, okay? So that's what's happened. Now, we got the Jews over here, and we got 71 AD, a very significant date in Israel's history. General Titus sacks Jerusalem and tears down the temple. Let's read one more verse. While you're back there, Jeannie's going to read. Bert, we'll give that to Jeannie. Wave your hand. Listen to Matthew 24, 1 and 2.
Jesus left the temple and was going away when his disciples came to point out to him the buildings of the temple. But he answered them, "You see all these, do you not? Truly I say to you, there will not be left here one stone upon another that will not be thrown down."
Yep. Sure enough, when you go on the Temple Mount, there's not one stone left of the Jewish temple. Okay? The mount is up there, but the temple is gone. We think that during the rapture tribulation years, the temple will be rebuilt because there's references to sacrifices and stuff. But the rapture may come first, so don't worry about the fact there's no temple. Yes?
Isn't the west wall, or the Wailing Wall, isn't that part of what the
Yeah,
temple?
part of the Temple Mount. The western side of that big picture of football field up on a mesa. You have to go up a ramp to get up there. The western side of it has a giant rock wall that was built many, many centuries later.
Oh.
The wall. And it's a huge stone. Actually, some of those stones may have been there because they weren't the temple stones, but they've repaired it so it doesn't collapse on us. And it was called the Wailing Wall prior to 1973 when the Jews didn't have access to Jerusalem. We'll get there in our story. Once they got access again, and today you can go to Jerusalem, you can go down to the western wall. They'll ask men to wear a yarmulke, and women pray on one end and men pray on the other end. And it's now called the Western Wall, but it's still very much there. It's going to die? How's this one? I'm good. Okay, well, thank you, my man, my tech man here. Okay, so the Christian movement now, the Christian movement exists without Jerusalem. And we go through these 12 Caesars. Caesar number 5 is Nero. Remember Nero? What is Nero famous for doing?
Fiddling.
He fiddled supposedly while Rome burned, and he blamed the Christians for setting the fire. Later, the Romans blamed him for setting the fire, but he was probably the worst one. It's somewhere around the year 64, not sure when, Peter and Paul are both in Rome. Paul is writing from Rome back to places. Peter, I think, is helping Mark write the Gospel of Mark from Rome, and they're kept in a prison called Mamertine Prison, which is still there. You can go see Mamertine Dungeon down in the ground, and they're killed, okay? But right after they're killed, the Jews are still Jews living in Israel, and they retreated out of Jerusalem up to this big high summer home of Herod called Masada. And if you're a Texan, you know the Alamo, where they fought to the death, right, in Texas, to not surrender to the Mexican army. And then in Masada, the Jews decided they'd rather die than be slaves. So several hundred of them were still up there. The Romans built a siege ramp. They're coming up the ramp. And the last of the Jews committed suicide, and the very last of the last groups jumped off the cliff to their deaths. And it's revered by all the Jews even today. Now that they have the land back, if you join the Israeli Defense Force as a soldier, you go out to Masada and you're sworn in. That's where you have your swearing in ceremony. That's pretty impressive. You go out there. Remember this. This is how dedicated we are to it. So Masada is done. And that's 73 AD on the left side of the handout. That's when the Jews are scattered out of Israel. And you have this term diaspora that's still used to this day. It means scattered like seed, spore, S-P-O-R-C. They're scattered like seed around the world. Now, in those days, the world would have been Europe and the Middle East, right? They could have made their way east to India, but I doubt if any of them got as far as China for a long time. They weren't even aware that South America, Africa, Northern Africa they knew about, but they didn't have much travel out there. They only had the Roman Empire. But Jews were scattered everywhere. However, and I'll have it on the handout, if you talk to Israel archaeologists, anthropologists, historians, they'll say, we've dug up evidence that there were Jewish people living in the land continuously for 2,000 years. It's documented long time. And I'll show you the importance of that in a minute. But meanwhile, the persecution goes on until another significant year, 312 AD. Constantine is the emperor of Rome. He's going out to fight a battle, and the night before the battle of Milvian Bridge, he has a vision in the sky of a cross. And we don't know much about what really happened, okay? But he gets excited about the cross and decides that this is the sign that God's going to give him the victory. And he has all of his soldiers the next morning paint a cross on their shields. And they fight the battle. And they even wrote the words, in hoc signo vinces, by this sign we will conquer. And they did. They won that battle and all the battles. And Constantine brought peace back to the warring factions of the Roman Empire. And the next year said, we got to stop persecuting the Christians. So he issues the Edict of Toleration of Christians. Everybody go, yeah, amen, right? Freedom of religion. It lasted 12 years. And Constantine himself and others behind him decided to go another step and required that everyone become a Christian. Groan out loud. Oh, that's not how the Christian faith works. In fact, at my seminary, the Christian history professor buys the theory that it was that requirement that everybody be baptized in every village of every age, baptize every living creature, that the Roman church, Christian priests, took willow branches, marched everybody in a big parade down by the river, and slung the water over, dipped the branches in, and they walked by, they just like hosed them down as they walked by. And that is the origin of sprinkling. Because in the New Testament, the word baptizo means to dunk. When you put a bucket in the well, in Hebrew and Greek language, you baptizo. You baptize the bucket in the well and lift it up, like we were doing this morning, right? So I'm one of those guys that thinks the best way to baptize is that. And I won't argue over how much water you have, but that's the origin of sprinkling, we think, where they had to baptize everybody. They didn't have time to do them one at a time, just sprinkle water on them. And we think that may be the origin of infant baptism as well, because they baptized the entire population. And then the Roman Catholic Church really hasn't developed yet, but it's going to, because persecution stops. And it really expands across the Roman Empire. I got to give the Catholics some shout out. They were great missionaries in the early centuries. They marched everywhere they could go and preached the gospel. The monks and the priests and everybody, and the nuns, yeah, they're great. So the church is expanding across the Roman Empire. Not all Christians were Catholics, but all the Catholics were Christians, okay? Not all dogs are poodles, but all poodles are dogs, okay? But you don't read much about the other branches of the church. I could give you 20 names of them, the Waldensians and these guys and those guys. They just weren't very well organized. But there's always, since the Bible was around, in either hand-printed copies or printed copies, people who read the Word of God and develop faith in Jesus outside of what we call the walls of the church, right? It still happens today. You've got all kinds of people coming to Christ that live hundreds of miles from the church. So the church is growing. The Roman Catholics are kind of in charge. Until 570 AD, a man named Mohammed is born. He's a traveling salesman. He's not real literate, but he is a powerful leader. And he cares deeply about religion. And he studies the Judaism religion. And he likes the idea of one God. There is Israel, the creed of Israel. Hear, O Israel, there is but one God. The Lord is God, and the Lord is one. Okay? It's Deuteronomy 6:24. He did not like the idea of one God in three persons, the Trinity, as we talk about, God the Father, God the Son, Holy Spirit. But he really liked the moral teachings of the Christian churches. So he basically combines Christian morality and modesty and kindness and all these kind of things, and with the Jewish idea of one God. And what comes out of that is this religion of Islam. supposedly from a revelation of a book that's called the Quran. And the Quran has like an Old Testament and New Testament, but they're flipped in order. The early surahs or chapters of the Quran are the newest. The later chapters are the earliest. And immediately, everybody in the Middle East fights Muhammad. They don't like what he's doing. The Jews fought him, the Christians fought him, the pagans fought him, everybody fought him. And so that's why Islam has this kind of military feel to it, is they did a lot of wars. In fact, he's born in 570, and then 50 years later, he's in Medina, and he has to flee from Medina to Mecca. And that's where they say Mecca is the holy city, and that's the birth of this religion called Islam. Now, does Islam mean, the word Islam mean peace? No, my class says no. It means bow the knee in submission. The word for peace is salam. But ISLAM, my friend Tony Weeder says to us, ISLAM, I shall love all Muslims. We don't hate them, we love them. And 99.99% of all the Muslims in the world are peaceful. The problem is there's about 1.6 billion Muslims. And so 1% of 1.6 billion would be 16 million, which are the ones that want to kill us. Right? It's a lot, that's more than our army. So instantly Islam and Christianity are in conflict, and they're in conflict for a long time. But the Great Commission of Islam was to help other people get right with Allah by conquering them. So they don't go out and witness, they go out and put the sword to you and say, say the confession and join the movement or we kill you. And they did it all across North Africa, all across Southern Europe. They swept across Turkey, Greece, Rome, the southern part of Spain. Have you ever heard the term Moor, M-O-O-R, the Moorish people? They're still descendants of the Moors in the southern part of Spain. Those were the Muslim peoples of Spain. There was a great movie called El Cid. That was a Christian guy fighting the Muslims. Yeah. We had lots of fights, because now we're going to see over on the Catholic side, there's a whole bunch of conferences as the church is working out major doctrines. The canon, the C-A-N-O-N, the measuring stick of what books belong in the Bible. It took a couple hundred years to decide. These 27 books are it. They have the breath of God on them. There's a lot of other historical writings. They're just historical writings, okay? But the 27 and the order of books is all settled out, and we had creeds. Now, most Protestant people or evangelical, we're not creedal people. We don't have a creed that you have to recite and swear to, but I've seen them in worship. The Methodists, Wesleyans used them in the old days. How many of you probably recited the Apostles' Creed? Okay, so I believe in God the Father, maker of heaven and earth, and in his Son Jesus, born of a Virgin Mary, persecuted by Pontius Pilate, crucified, dead, buried, on the third day he rose again, lives in the right hand of God, and I believe in the Holy Spirit. There you go. Those are creeds. I think Wesleyans and Baptists and churches tend to have confessional statements that are not creeds, are not binding, because there's a lot of freedom of the Spirit for minor things. And Augustine first said it, that in essentials we need unity, in non-essentials we need liberty, and in all things we need charity. And Wesley quoted that big time. In essentials, unity. We're unified on the cores of the faith, but I'm not going to argue over how much water they used in your baptism, or whether the rapture comes at the beginning of the tribulation, or the middle, or the end. If you want to hang around for the trip, you be my guest. I'm out of here. Okay. So, the creatures taking shape, conferences are being worked out. But here's what happened. On the right side, Rome collapsed even before Muhammad was born. So when Rome fell, but it just got worse. Rome peaked probably by the time of Jesus or shortly after, maybe around 312, you could say was the peak. And the empire began to fall apart. They had bad leaders, and the people became very immoral. I'm sorry, was I talking about the United States today? A series of bad leaders, and the people lost their moral compass. In the book of 2 Kings, after Solomon, and then his son and his nephew split the kingdom, Jeroboam, Rehoboam, we had Israel and Judah, series of kings, mostly bad, a few good ones, mostly bad kings. Morality fell, what happened? They fell. So, yeah, we need a spiritual awakening in America, folks, or we're going to become irrelevant. We'll still exist. England still exists. The Netherlands are still a country. They are spiritually bankrupt. Belgium is spiritually bankrupt. Yeah. I mean, there are young people there. We have 80 people in the youth group. They don't even have youth groups. There's nobody going to church. in many parts of England, many of the little neighborhood churches are now mosques. Because the Muslim refugees in France, you saw the riots in France recently. They were protesting about Gaza and all that. What was interesting, you had this huge picture of thousands of people, and they're all waving flags, right? This is in Paris, France. It's before the Olympics. And all the flags they were waving, not a single flag was the French flag. There were flags of other countries or flags of Hamas. Yeah, these are thousands of people.
You probably took, for how, you said 1.6 billion, or how many billion are Christians?
Yeah, there's about 8 billion people. We just topped 8 billion, which is 8,000 million. And all, let's take a broad view, okay? Let's include everybody who names the name of Jesus. All the Western Roman Catholics, all the Eastern Orthodox, the Greek Orthodoxes, all the denominations you can think of. We'll throw in the Mormons and the just for fun, okay? You get a little over 2 billion.
Okay, that's what I thought.
We're the most global, we're everywhere. Then you get 1.6. Then you got China with close to 1 billion Buddhists or animists. Then you have India with close to 1 billion Hindus. You got 1 billion Hindus. So now you're adding up.
1 billion?
Yeah, about 2.2 Christian, 1.6 Muslim, and another billion. Where are we now? Over 6 something? Yeah, we're getting there. I don't have the exact numbers. The number of Jews is minuscule. This is what's really significant. The number of Jewish people is 20 million. Not 20 billion, not 200 million, 20 million. It's a tiny fraction. In fact, the Jewish people today, I was looking this up last night, are 0.2% of the population. Not even 1% of the population. And yet they win 22% of all the Nobel Prizes in 2023. They're overachievers, which is part of what it means to be the chosen people. Yes, sir.
That's one thing I learned too, that is Iran, at a time earlier, they were the smartest nation and had the most technology until they got religion. And once they got it, they said they didn't like smarts.
Yeah.
So they would have the most Nobel Prize winners of anybody if they would have not gotten religion.
Right. Now, I'm not sure, was that back around the 800, 900s?
Yes.
Yeah, the Persian people were the leaders. In fact, there's a season when the Muslims, even in Spain, are ahead of everybody in math. And the numerical numbers, the digits that we use, right, came from Arabic, right? Yeah, Arabic numerals. The Romans had letters, like, you remember Latin Roman numerals? And the Greeks used that. To this day, all of our math is pioneered on stuff that came out of the Muslim Arabic system. I saw a hand somewhere. Yes, ma'am, Virginia.
Something that really encouraged me was how many of the American athletes were wearing crosses around their necks.
Yeah, I noticed that too. And I didn't see anybody kneeling during the anthem. You're gonna get them.
They not only wore crosses around their neck, once interviewed, they all gave glory to God. Praised him for the fact that he had made them help, they gave him glory back.
I like that. I like it on both teams, win or lose. There is a verse that says God is not pleased, not impressed with the strength of the legs of man. So I don't think God cares if the Broncos win or lose. Sorry. We can still pray they do better than last year. Okay, back to the middle. Yes, ma'am.
Just
jump in.
another step on the bunny trail. God isn't mocked.
Right.
Right.
Oh, that's right. Oh, that was good. Yeah.
They mocked God.
Yeah, there was an interesting thing. I saw that in the thing. I didn't know what it was. It was a person with a halo figure. It looked like a tableau of people at a table. But they were mocking the Lord's Supper very intentionally. They were drag queens. And you've probably seen, I've seen a number of blogs about how do we respond to that. And the best thing is to basically ignore it. We're going to be mocked. We're going to be hated by the world. It's okay. I don't get all amped up about that. I confess, I get amped up about men masquerading as women and boxing and beating up other women. That makes me angry. And I'm not ready to go to war over that.
Jim, I cannot believe the head of the Olympic Committee said the other day, there is no way to differentiate between men and women.
Oh,
man. Spiritual delusion of the world. Okay. All right, the head of the IOC. Okay, back to history here real quick. We're going to keep moving. So the significance of Omar 637, he's the guy that came in, conquered Jerusalem, and built this mosque. It's fallen down on top of the Temple Mount, the Mosque of Omar. But the Mosque of Omar is still there. It's an 1800s version, this Dome of the Rock. If you just Google Jerusalem photos, you're gonna see this beautiful building. It's all tile and colored blue and turquoise, and then the top of it is a golden dome. So the one you see was built in the 1800s. But from 637 all the way to 1973, that's 1,300 years, the Muslims control the city of Jerusalem. Where are the Jews? They're scattered. They're scattered. That's the point of this. They're scattered. Now, as Islam conquers all of the Middle East and North Africa, they get all the way up to the gates of Vienna. And it's a historic battle that I've never seen a movie. It'd be a great movie. Charles Martel, who is the Austrian general, a Christian guy, they nicknamed him Charles the Hammer, good name for a general. And he defeats them in Vienna and pushes them back. But meanwhile, while he did that, for the next couple hundred years, Christian armies attempted to take back all the land that the Muslims had conquered in a series of wars that were fought maybe for 20 years and then no war for 80 years and then another 20 years of war. Things didn't happen fast back then. And these were called the Crusades. You've heard the term Crusades, right? And I've even seen Christian schools that have their football team motto as the Crusaders. Probably not a good idea. It's probably the darkest season of the Christian history. We tried to emulate their style and fight back with their armies. And these armies marched down toward Rome, but toward Jerusalem. They never actually captured the Holy Land for any length of time. It didn't work. And it just killed a lot of people, and it created a lot of animosity between Middle Eastern people and Christians to this day because of those wars that were fought. Okay?
Yeah, but they have a mosque in Jerusalem.
Yes. Oh yeah, there's tons of them. Okay, now flip the page. So we're now talking about the Middle Ages or the Dark Ages. No matter called, the word medieval just means middle era. The Dark Ages were dark because there was no national government. Remember, Rome had collapsed. The barbarians took over. All the nations were gone in Europe. There weren't any nations. There were just local governments. The movie Robin Hood, the story of Robin Hood takes place during that time, where there's a sheriff of Nottingham. There's no national government in England even. King Richard the Lionhearted was out of power. He comes back at the end of Robin Hood's story, but it was a good picture of just chaos and bad. Local leaderships don't work. God is a God of nations. The word nations appears many times in the Bible. There's a current political movement against nationalities. We should all be one global population, one global citizens. And if you're a Christian and you believe in nations, I call you a Christian nationalist. That's actually a political term. There are people who would like to make this a Christian nation. I think it's better made a nation where we have freedom of religion. It's based upon Christian principles and values. And the founding fathers were largely Christians, had Christian values, but they didn't try to say Christianity is the state religion here. They said you can worship God any way you want, including not at all. And that's been a great value of America, is religious liberty. And I would oppose any movement to make all the American citizens required to be Wesleyans or whatever. That wouldn't work. No. So anyway, Dark Ages, the Roman Church, about 1054, split with the Eastern Church. And this is a significant part of Christian history. We had one global kind of church, and then it split in half. So Rome in the West is the Roman Catholic. Catholic means universal church. Then you have what's called the Eastern Orthodox Church, right? And there's a branch of Greek Orthodox, Egyptian Coptic Church, Ukrainian Orthodox, Russian Orthodox. None of them get along. So we've had our problems with that, the same kind of thing. But during the dark, on the left side of the back page, during the Dark and Middle Ages, the land of Israel was thinly populated, poorly developed. It was swampy down what is now the Jordan River Valley. And the Greeks coined the term Palestina to identify the region. It was kind of a pun, a play on words of Philistia. You remember the Philistines that David fought? That's where the word Palestine comes from. There's not any genealogical connection. They just borrowed the word. Those are the Philistines used to live here, so the people live here now is Palestinians. But the significance for you to see is that second paragraph. Whoever resided in what we now call Israel, whether they were Jews or Muslims or Christians, everybody was called Palestinians peoples. But nobody had a passport. There was never a country called Palestine. Nobody had a driver's license that said Palestine. Nobody even had an ID card that said there was no such place. It was just a regional term like the Front Range. or the western slope, right? That's a key to understand. That's gonna change later, right? On the right side of the handout, you all remember the Renaissance, a French word that means rebirth. It was coming out of the darkness, education, light, birth. We had civilization again. And it's in the 1300s, 1500s. This is when we had the nation states, like Italy, Germany, France. They all come in this Middle Age time. People like Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci. A university sprang up in Paris. They called it was by Christians, so they called it Our Lady. They named it for Our Lady, Mother Mary, right? Notre Dame. Notre means our, Dame means lady, yeah. We have a university in Indiana today by that name. It's also a Catholic school, but the original Notre Dame Cathedral, and you saw on the Olympics, was the Renaissance. This is way back when, right? And then in England, where there was a place where the oxen had forded a river in a village called Oxford, they started the university. And we had higher learning coming back in. During those dark ages, there was really no one well educated except politicians, lawyers, and preachers. Now I'm thinking, you want to have a messed up, chaotic country, have nobody but lawyers and preachers be educated. That's not going to come out. Dr. Phil, how's that working out for you? Not good, okay? Let the people be educated. Now the Renaissance happens, and then after the Renaissance is another word, the Reformation. And the Reformation was the period of time when Christians said the Catholics have drifted too far away from their origins. They've made up too many rules, they've got all these crazy things going on. Martin Luther is one of those guys. John Wycliffe. Wycliffe's thing was, why is the Bible only in Latin when no one speaks Latin anymore? The Italians didn't even speak Latin, they speak Italian. The English spoke English. And so he put the Bible in English, and they wanted to kill him for it. In fact, he died before they could kill him. But they dug up his bones and threw him in the river, burned him and threw him in the river. John Wycliffe. John Wycliffe. He's called the Morning Star of the Reformation. But there's a great parable about that they said they threw him in the river Swift. They threw his ashes to get rid of him. Get rid of Wycliffe, threw him in the river Swift. But the river Swift flows into the river Severn. And the Severn River flows into the Avon. And the Avon flows into the Thames. And the Thames flows into the Atlantic Ocean. And the ashes of John Wycliffe went to the 7 continents of the world. So did the Bible in English, yeah. It doesn't work. In fact, you can't kill Christianity by killing it. The blood of the martyrs is just a seed of the church, yeah. We may see that again. We're seeing that more Christians are persecuted in a lot of places. Where they are, the Christian faith goes up, yeah.
And Wycliffe today is translated all over the
Right.
world.
That's why the big translation, Bible translation ministry is named for him. In America, we often call it Wycliffe, but the British pronunciation, the correct pronunciation, the proper pronunciation is Wycliffe. Okay. Then you have Martin Luther. Remember Martin Luther? Luther's a German guy, a Catholic. He's a monk. He loves the Catholic Church, but he really wants to reform it. He sees a lot of corruption in the church. And so on a day, he made a public announcement. In the Middle Ages, if you wanted to make a public debate, you didn't hold a press conference. You wrote out your theses, your arguments, and you nailed them to the bulletin board of the community, which was the front door of the church, where everybody came on Sunday. So he nails 99 theses to the front door of the church in Wittenberg. And a man named Gutenberg had just invented a printing press. Guess what he printed? Luther's 99 Theses and the Bible. The Gutenberg Bible, but he also printed Luther stuff. And it got handed out like Jim Walter's flyers got handed out all over the place. And it set Europe on fire. And Northern Europe all revolted against the Catholic Church. Southern Europe didn't do it. Yes, sir.
One of the things that was happening is that's when the Catholic Church began to sell what was called indulgences.
Yep, that's right.
And one of the leaders that was doing this was a monk by the name of Tetzel.
Yep.
And Luther he went around with a drum to get people's attention to sell these indulgences. And Luther heard him one day out in the street, and he said, "Tetzel, I'm going to put a hole in his drum."
Yeah, that is exactly that was the one where Luther said, right, that's it, I can't take it anymore. Because Tetzel would beat the drum and say, if you'll bring an offering, we'll get your grandma out of purgatory. Bring $100 and you get your grandma out of purgatory. Well, grandma's in heaven anyway. But bring $1,000 and you can avoid purgatory. We can have a capital campaign here and say, that is exactly the one. That was the tipping point. And it was like throwing a match into gasoline because all of Europe blows up on fire. Yes, ma'am.
Is it true that Luther hated the Jews?
No, they were confused about the Jews. And Luther died before he had time to straighten out water baptism. They were still infant baptizing. But if you want to read a great book, it's called Here I Stand. It's by a man named Bainton. You can get it from the public library. It's a biography of Martin Luther. It's a novel. It's a page turner. And
He started out studying law. His father wanted him to be a lawyer, just like the rest of the family.
well, we could do a whole hour on Luther, because he really does. I'll tell you his motto, okay? Only by grace, only through faith, only the scriptures. Three phrases. Sola gratia, sola fide, sola scriptura in Latin. Only by grace are we saved. Only by faith do we access grace. And the scriptures are the only authoritative rules for us, not the words of not the teaching of any teacher or pope. And they wanted to kill him for that. They hated him, but it's a long story that people secreted him out and saved his life, and he ends up getting married and having 8 kids. Wrote a bunch of hymns, right? A mighty fortress is our God, a Lord never failing. Where's Tammy? Luther wrote a bunch of the hymns. Yeah, Luther was great. And the Lutheran Church, of course, follows his name for Luther.
Today, my sister attends a Lutheran church who do not believe the Bible is authentic.
The sadly thing, almost every denomination now has churches that have become really loose and fast. Even the Methodists, I don't know about Wesleyans. There's only a few Baptist churches on the East Coast that have kind of gone woke in that, but lots of the Lutherans. In fact, the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America, sometimes pronounced ELCA, was the first one that stopped being evangelical and became really politically liberal left far. The current candidate for president, Kamala Harris, is a member of the Evangelical Lutheran Church. It fits, because they're the woke branch. Yeah. So what? And see, here's the deal, Sandy. If you tell me, oh, my brother goes to Baptist, Costal, whatever, Presbyterian, Episcopal Church, he's told you nothing, because you don't know anything. Well, tell me about your church. You know, what do they believe? Because all the denominations have that spectrum now. This kind of stuff. The old mainline denominations, the Presbyterian, Episcopal, Methodist, Lutheran, they are suffering the worst. You know, the older denominations have got the worst. The more Wesleyans, this church, we're toeing the line. And what I know we're trying to do here is be true to the Word, change the methods, change the dress code if you have to, change the time of service, change all the periphery things, the packaging of the gospel. But don't change the gospel. Don't take the meat out of the burger. Yeah. And we'll get there. That's really pretty recent stuff. Actually, it happened in Europe in the 1800s. And when World War II came along, they were already in bad shape. Even England had gone down the tubes. And they had a great spiritual awakening when they took church bells down and melted them into bombs and bullets, made bullets. And somebody said, yeah, people will listen to bullets and they won't listen to church bells, you know. But they literally had to melt church bells down to get the metal Britain deal. Anyway, where are we going? We're almost caught up here. We got the Reformation of the church, and all the what we call the Protestant or the Protestant denominations, anybody's not Catholic, we all have our roots back at that Reformation. There was an English Reformation, the Episcopal, the Anglican Church was born from that, Methodist sprang from that, Wesleyan sprang from that. It's like a tree coming down. It's kind of interesting. But that was the Reformation. It's a good thing. And all of a sudden, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, and America has got independence in 1776. And now we're in the 1800s, where I wanted to get to, because during the 1800s, many, many Jews got on those sailing boats and came to America. They saw from Europe that America was the place of opportunity. And they settled all along the East Coast from New York, Long Island, to Miami, as they say, Miami. We're the land. And Neil Diamond wrote that song, Coming to America. We're coming to America. He's a Jew. In fact, a lot of our Hollywood leaders are Jewish people. A list of Jews would shock you if you knew all the people that have either, not necessarily religious Jews, but they identify as Jewish people who are leaders in these different industries. In fact, in many countries, they resent that. The non-Jews resent how successful the Jews are. But Jews are successful because of hard work and family values and high education. So that was happening in the 1800s. Over in the other part of the world, Theodore Herzl is the guy who coined the term Zionism. You'll see in the newspapers today or on TV, He's a Zionist or he's an anti-Zionist. Zion is an actual physical mountain on the west side of Jerusalem, Mount Zion. So it's a biblical symbol for the state, the physical land of Israel. So when someone is a Zionist, I'm a Zionist, we think that Israel should own that land. When you're an anti-Zionist, you think that they are illegal occupiers of Muslim lands, because the Muslims were there before 1948. And of course the Jews go, we were there when King David was there. 1,000 years before, 1,500 years before Muhammad was even born, Jews were in that land. They've got the deepest history there. The people that were displaced by the Jews when they came in the book of Joshua, which we're going to study next, Joshua, they weren't Muslims, they were pagans of various kinds. So then we get to World War I. World War I brought the end of this massive Muslim empire that started with Muhammad and then for the last 500 years was run by the Turks, the Ottoman Turkish Empire. If you ever saw the movie Lawrence of Arabia, it's the army of General Allenby, the British army moves up from Egypt to Jerusalem to Damascus, and Lawrence organizes some Arabs that are favoring the Brits, and he beats them to Damascus. That's the whole point of the movie. Lawrence, T.E. Lawrence was a great leader and rallied the Arabs to fight with the British against the Turks. So the British were the empire of the world at the World War I. And when World War I ended, over somewhere, I have this on here, on the right-hand side, after World War I, the British are the ones who created all these current borders that we call Iraq and Syria and Lebanon and Jordan and Saudi Arabia and Emirates and Yemen. Now, Persia, Iran was there forever, and Egypt was there going way back. But all these other states didn't even exist as nations till World War I, which is why they're so fragile and they're easily overthrown. Iraq was a peaceful place until Saddam took it over and made a mess out of it, right? And Lebanon was a very good friend. A lot of Christians in Lebanon, until Iran moved in this army of Hezbollah, and they basically run the country now. Jordan is still our little friend, sitting there right across the Jordan River. And Saudi Arabia is coming around. In fact, they're all afraid of Iran. That's their common thing. All these Sunni Arabs are terrified of the mullahs in Iran. So you got World War I. Now, y'all know World War II, don't you? World War II is the Holocaust. There were 20 million Jewish people on the planet before World War II, and suddenly it drops to 12 to 13. 7 or 8 million people killed in a series of less than 10 years. Unbelievable. It really happened. Now we're back to 20 million today. And I put on the bottom of the left-hand side, somewhere on here, I put ahead how many Jews there were in the world. It was on the bottom right. In the state of Israel, it's the only democracy in the Middle East, and there are 7 million Jewish people in Israel, about 2 million Muslims that are Israeli citizens and support the country, and only about 500,000 Christians or other religions. It is 7 million Jews. In America, we have about 5.5 million Jews. So get this, 12.5 million of all the Jews live in one of two places, here in Israel. The other 7.5 million live among 200 nations. So with the bulk of the Jewish population being us and Israel, I'm the guy that thinks whatever happens to Israel in prophecy happens to us. We are inextricably tied to them. And when the Iranian mullahs cry out, death to Israel, what do they say next? Death to America. Yeah. Right, and Israel says, who is our biggest ally? America. And what do we say, who's our biggest ally? Israel. It's tough. We're in a tough situation. But to get back to the history of Israel, we had the Holocaust. How many of y'all were born in 1947? I was almost born. I was a gleam in my mother's eye. Yeah. In 1947, the United Nations, brand new, said we need to give a piece of this land back to the Jews. They've suffered the Holocaust. We're going to give them a piece of the land. And they knew the Jews had been killed in several of the European countries and weren't really welcome in either Russia, Germany, Poland, all those places, France. So 47, in the spring of 48, Israel actually declared itself a nation and went into business. And within a month, they're trying to form an army. Within a month, 6 other Arab nations attacked them and tried to drive them into the sea. I have 5, I'm sorry, maybe it was 5. It was Egypt, Syria, Iraq. I don't think Iraq was involved. Jordan and Lebanon, that's at least 4. Maybe there's 5 or 6. I was working from memory by this time when they ended. Anyway, that's the War of Independence. It was a miracle above miracles. Somehow Israel did it. Now, when that war started, the mayor of Jerusalem, his title was Mufti. You heard the word Mufti? That's a British term for a civilian leader. not a general. The Mufti of Jerusalem, who by the way was Yasser Arafat's uncle, just, you know who Yasser Arafat was? He led the PLO later. This man, the mayor of Jerusalem, declared that there's going to be a war next week, and I want all the Arab peoples to leave Jerusalem, leave Israel, get out of the country, because there's going to be these armies that are going to pour in and kill everybody. And you can look in the museums or go online, you can read the Cairo Daily newspaper reports this story. The Mufti of Jerusalem, Abdul al-Hal, whatever his name was, has ordered all the Arabs to flee the country just temporarily while the Arab armies come in and kill these Jews that think they're going to be a nation. Well, the Arab armies came in and lost, right? And the new government of Israel said, if you left, you don't come back. You're out. And there were about 220,000, give or take some number, that found themselves east of Israel over in Jordan or north in Lebanon. And the papers began calling them Palestinian refugees because they had been refugees from that geographical area. And you would think that Jordan and Lebanon then would have just given them green cards and made them citizens, right? No, they want to use them as pawns. And they have for now 80 years. There's very few alive still who can remember the day that they were left Israel. They left because it was now the state of Israel they fled. Most of that generation is gone. There's very few left. It's their kids and grandkids, and there's now 1 million of them. They've populated a big population. And so Jordan puts up with them, Syria puts up with them, some are in Egypt, some are in Iraq, many are in Gaza. You know, a lot of these people are in Gaza, and that's why you have this clamor for a Palestinian state or country. You do have to feel compassion for these guys. If you're a third generation or second generation refugee from Israel, from that first war, you're a Muslim Arab and you're in Jordan, and the Jordanians will not let you be a citizen, you have no country. Nobody will give you a passport. You can't travel. You can't vote. You have no citizenship. You're just this refugee. Yeah. And it's a shame that these. Yeah, there are many of them are here. Oh yeah, there are many people here in this country who made their way here or to England because we would give them a status. Yeah. But that's the dilemma. So the two-state solution you hear about on TV is the idea of let's create a nation recognized by the United Nations. First off, it would be on the east side of Israel, what's called the West Bank. You know, it's the east side of Israel, but it's the West Bank of the Jordan River border, or in Gaza, right? But now you're hearing the Israel leaders saying, we ain't doing the two-state thing until you recognize our right to exist. So we've got this dilemma. When I'm there and I ask Israeli guys, hey, if you were king, sir, if you were king, how would you solve this? They always say, it cannot be solved. That's what I hear. It'll never be solved. And I go, well, gee, that's what the Bible actually says. It'll never be solved. But now you see that history. And down the lower left, I want you to see in 67, they fought the 6-Day War. Israel gained more land, and they kept it. In 73 was the Yom Kippur War. There's a good movie about that called Golda. Boy, it's worth seeing. It's about Golda Meir. You can get it on Netflix. You can get all these things on Netflix. And the movie Golda is about this woman who's a chain smoker who was the prime minister of Israel during this war. And they kind of got caught off guard, but they rallied back and won the war. And that's when they captured JRS. That's my code for airport code for Jerusalem. I made it up. They didn't have it. But that's when they captured Jerusalem. And the Jews, want that to be their eternal capital. And the U.S. Embassy was in Tel Aviv, the political capital, for a long, long time. And then when Trump was president, he said, I'm going to move the embassy to Jerusalem. Oh my gosh, they said World War III will start tomorrow. He moved the embassy, nothing happened. I've been to that embassy, it's in Jerusalem. We stood in front of it, we didn't go inside, we just stood in front of it, took a picture, nothing happened. So the other nations are beginning to recognize. And then we had border wars in 89, 06, and 09, and then finally we have the October 7th Gaza war that's still going on, which terrifies me because it could become a huge war tomorrow. I look at the news every day wondering if the big war is on. But boy, I think there are forces in this trying to create a peace treaty real hard. And then there are forces in it that don't want a peace treaty. And I don't know how God's going to solve this thing. I tell you that because all big wars start as little wars, and they tend to blow up a little bit. This one could really blow up. So now, you see the history of Israel, the rise and fall. What was the peak of the Old Testament era? What happened, as I say, was the peak? David committed a sin with, and I'm telling you, everything after that is just a long So some people say America, 1776, peaked in World War II when we liberated the world from Nazi and Japanese horrors, right? And we've actually been down. But I thought we kind of came back up in the 80s, and we fought that first Gulf War in 1991 and kept Saddam from taking over the whole oil thing over there. Then we've kind of gone down, and I don't know, we had the second war and took out Saddam in 2003. Now we've come 20 more years, we've survived Y2K, survived COVID. We're still in business, right? The jury's still out, I believe. But the answer is, you know, vote for the people of your choice. I enjoyed seeing Perry Buck this morning. She's a hoot down there. I'm getting to know her. Perry Buck, she's running for county commissioner of Will County. But she's in our church here, so. And this is not an endorsement of the church. The management of the church is not endorsing Perry Buck. Is that clear? You better vote. Anyway. No. And then, where were we? Your comments, where are we? I appreciate y'all jumping in. That's a great story about that. I wasn't going to tell, but that really is what the world changed because the guy was beating the drum. Okay, we're almost out of time. Miss Connie's going to come up with the last comment. Hope you're ready for lunch. I'm up here after class. We can talk. Miss Connie.
Hey, Thursday, the 15th, this coming Thursday, we're doing the Wings Over the Rockies tour, which is really an awesome museum if you've never been there. It's in Denver, and it has Jim's old plane hanging out from the ceiling.
My antique one. The antique museum.
Oh, he's so fast, but you would like to go. We still have 4 seats left on 2 vans. We'll leave the church here about 8:15. We have reservations at 10 to get into the museum. After we've gone through, we'll go to lunch somewhere in the area, then head back here. So if you are interested in going on the vans, let me know.
You can also meet us there, but let us know if you're going to meet.
Yes, yeah, definitely. It's $15 to get into the museum, which is the group rate price, and then whatever you eat for lunch, it's your choice. Okay?
All right. We won't say the Apostles' Creed, but let's sing the oldest benediction we have. Praise God, from whom all blessings flow. Praise Him, all creatures here below. Praise Him above the heavenly hosts. Praise Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. Good job, choir. Come on, people.